4. Mexican War. Insensitivity to intelligence needs persisted in Washington during the next 3 decades. When General Zachary Taylor marched into the recently annexed Republic of Texas, he had little useful information about the terrain or natural defenses of the territory. When Texas was admitted to the Union in December 1845, Taylor advanced to the Rio Grande to repel an anticipated Mexican attack. On February 6, 1846, the Army received notification that field maneuvers might be ordered on short notice. Quote, "For 6 months, while at Corpus Christi, although he had engineers, and although traders were streaming through the place from beyond the Rio Grande, Taylor did not even know the way to Matamoros," so wrote Lieutenant Colonel E. A. Hitchcock, then commanding the 3rd Infantry, whose diary and papers are now in the Library of Congress. It was not until February 24th that the necessary data were procured, not until March 8th that the Army began to move. A light unit for scouting purposes was an obvious need, and William L. Marcy, the Secretary of War, had given Taylor express orders to call for assistance from the Texans, by whom legs were valued chiefly as the means of sticking to a horse. Yet nothing of the kind was done. There was no intelligence service. Dense ignorance reigned at headquarters as to topography or local conditions. Taylor had been instructed to learn all he could regarding both and to keep the War Department informed. But in spite of Marcy's earnest requests, he appears to have forwarded nothing whatever and to have had no useful ideas about the campaign. Napoleon had said that any general who, when taking the field in a peopled country, neglected intelligence service was a general ignorant of his trade. End quote. Contrary to the advice of General Winfield Scott, who was about to enter the field, Taylor made no effort to recruit disgruntled contrabandistas, Mexican border folk skilled in smuggling and otherwise unhappy with their own government, as spies or informers. He marched to Monterrey without utilizing scouts, without almost any precautions against surprise attack, and assuming he would encounter no serious resistance in seizing the city, without any real information as to the fortifications or defenses he would encounter. When General Scott landed at Vera Cruz with his army in March 1847, Lieutenant Colonel Hitchcock, previously serving with Taylor in the north, had joined his expedition serving as Assistant Inspector General. By his own account, it would appear that it was Hitchcock who recruited and organized the spy forces which had been urged on Taylor and subsequently served Scott so well. On June 5, 1847, Hitchcock noted in his diary that he had taken into service, quote, "a very celebrated captain of robbers," end quote, who, quote, "knows the band and the whole country," end quote. This was Dominguez, whom Hitchcock tested with the delivery of a communique, quote, "and if he performs the service faithfully, I shall further employ him," end quote. 2 weeks later, Hitchcock recorded his return with a letter of response. Thus was the Mexican Spy Company, or the 40 Thieves, as it came to be known, established. Quote, "Dominguez, leader of the Spy Company, had been an honest weaver, it was said, but on being robbed by a Mexican officer, took to the road and became a brigand chief. When the Americans reached Puebla, he was living there quietly with his family. But knowing the insecurity of his position, he accepted Hitchcock's offer to become a scout. His band consisted at first of 5 men, but rose to about 100, and probably might have been increased to 2,000. He and men of his even entered the capital in disguise. While he was at the head of the company, the actual captain was a Virginian named Spooner, who had been a member of his band, and the 2 lieutenants were also foreigners. The men seem to have served and obeyed orders faithfully, and their leader refused very advantageous terms offered by Santa Anna." End quote. Eventually, Hitchcock obtained the release of some of Dominguez's compatriots from local jails, arranged to pay each recruit $20 a month, organized the band into companies, and placed them under the direct orders of General Scott, with Dominguez acting as leader of the forces. While the spy company was most useful to Scott, its members were regarded as loathsome and immoral by many of the officers and men of the Army. Dr. Albert G. Brackett, a lieutenant with General Joseph Lane's forces under Scott's command, has penned the following first-hand observation. Quote, "The Contra guerrillas under Dominguez were a rascally set of fellows, and I never could look upon them with any degree of sympathy. Traitors to their own country in the darkest hour of stern trial, they aided the Americans against their own countrymen and covered themselves with lasting infamy. There is an old saying, 'We love the treason, but despise the traitor,' which did not hold good with us. We loathed the treason and cursed the traitor. Every man in the company was a jailbird, and a worse body of men could not have been collected together. I once rode from the National Bridge to Ancero with a squadron of these chaps, and was the only American with them. I had been carrying an order down from Ancero to the bridge and was on my return. They rode along singing ribald songs, discharging their escopettes, a short rifle or carbine, every few minutes, and behaving in the most unsoldier-like manner. They had a few women along with them who seemed to be as thoroughly steeped in vice as the men. Each man carried a lance and wore a wide red band around his hat. Mexican treachery is proverbial, and these contra-guerrillas were a complete embodiment of it. On first seeing them, I thought very much, as one of our Irish soldiers did, 'May the devil fly away, wouldn't 'em for a set of ragamuffins.'" End quote. Undoubtedly, those in the spy company were aware of these resentments and prejudices, and a trace of that feeling can be detected in this brief passage in a letter from Captain Robert Anderson, 3rd Artillery, to his mother. Quote, "We have in our pay a company of Mexicans who are called the 40 Thieves. They are, I expect, some of the gentlemen robbers Thompson mentions. They were asked the other day if they would not be afraid of being murdered by their countrymen for acting with us after we left the country, and their captain's answer was, 'That is our business. We will take care of ourselves.' They are very useful in getting information, etc., and are used individually or collectively, as their services are required. The captain says he can increase his band to 1,500 or 2,000 if a greater number be wanted than he now has." End quote. Indeed, what was the fate of the spy company as an American victory became apparent? Quote, "As danger diminished, so did the need for the irregulars' services. Promises of payment remained promises only. Apparently, President Polk had an appropriation he could utilize for such things, and it would seem that he drew on it. But either the commitments were made by irresponsible people, or the political and military machines simply were not set up to administer such unorthodox operations, despite the official-sounding name of spy company. Some officers of high personal integrity paid out of their own pockets. When they did, it was their own decision and their own loss as far as the government was concerned. With the signing of peace, even these amenities stopped. The once sought-after irregulars were bandied about, even ordered from camps. Doubtless the qualities which had been found useful to the Army now posed threats or at least embarrassment, and their possessors were classed as undesirable. Some were ordered to get out of the country. Others, still in the United States, were advised that the best that could be done for them was an offer of transportation to the border and freedom to cross into Mexico, the one area on the face of the globe where they could not live, at least not for long." End quote. In his diary entry of June 5, 1848, Hitchcock records he was to discharge the spy company, quote, "with their own consent by paying them $20 per man at Vera Cruz, except the chief, Dominguez, who will go to New Orleans." End quote. Those electing to remain in service, quote, "expect to go to Campeche on an expedition proposed by General Lane on his own hook." End quote. As it does not appear that the Campeche mission was realized, the remnants of the spy company probably were dispersed into the countryside, without any further American payments, to pursue their old craft as bandits. Another account regarding the fate of the spy company says simply that its members, quote, were offered $20 apiece and a trip to Texas, end quote. Thus, it remains uncertain as to how many in the Mexican spy company received final compensation for their services, and beyond this, how many were left to fend for themselves in their homeland or were removed to the United States. While the spy company is generally thought to have provided useful intelligence for General Scott, its unique nature and the experience of United States armed forces in the Mexican hostilities prompt agreement with the conclusion that, quote, the war with Mexico gave many American officers a certain practical training for Civil War marches and battlefields, but from its extempore Secret Service, little of positive value could have been derived, end quote. Footnote. Bryan, page 118. Of passing interest is the difficulty President Polk had in protecting his secret diplomatic efforts and the lack of any intelligence organization to assist on this security problem. See Anna Caston Nelson, Secret Agents and Security Leaks, President Polk and the Mexican War. Journalism Quarterly, v. 52, Spring 1975, 9-14, 98. End footnote. This is Our Hidden History